department, and my research combines my backgrounds in English literature, linguistics and computer studies. So the combination of linguistics and literature comes to this area called stylistics, which is not a group, it's not a famous group, it's a discipline. And what I'm interested in specifically is an area of research in digital fiction. Now, I'm assuming you don't know what that is, probably very few people know what that is, so I'm going to spend most of my time telling you what that is. Okay. So digital fiction is a form of literature which is written on and read from a computer. It's not e-books, it's not print converted to digital, it's specifically written for that environment. So here's a load of screenshots of digital fiction, which you can't really appreciate because they're interactive. So these are static images, don't really kind of give you a sense of what digital fiction is. So I'm just going to give you two brief examples to sort of explain that. So it began in the 80s with something called hypertext fiction. And so it's predominantly text-based, and you can see you experience these kind of screens one by one. And you can see here you have this chunk of text, and these red boxes signify that these are hyperlinks. So you can read through this hypertext by clicking away and pressing an enter key and just going through in a linear fashion, or you can select links from the page and essentially choose your own pathway through the text. So the kind of people often compare them to the choose your own adventure stories that you had as a kid. They're a bit like that, I suppose. I suppose they're a bit more sophisticated, I like to think, but maybe they're not. But they're essentially, you're interacting with this text throughout your experience. So the reader has a role, and you can choose different pathways through these texts, and you will get different outcomes depending on which path you choose through them. So more recently, this is kind of in the 80s and the 90s, and these are CD-ROM based, so before the web, these were created. Imagine or remember that. So anyway, so more recently we've got web and digital fiction moves to using the affordances of the web. So we have more sophisticated, perhaps visually at least, examples of digital fiction. Although the original text-based ones are very structurally interesting to me. But here you can see we've got images. This one actually has sound effects. This little rabbit moves across the screen and you might get film. But we still have this thing where the reader has to navigate their way through the text. So we have hyperlinks, the reader can choose from this timeline at the bottom of the screen to navigate their way through and choose their own experience to some extent through these kind of texts. So these are the different types of digital fiction, which again, I wouldn't expect you to have heard of any of them, but they range from text-based interactive fictions where you respond to commands using the keyboard, to the hypertext fiction I just showed you, flash fiction using flash software, so perhaps more visual, more kinetic in a way. Some video games come under my remit of digital fiction, insofar as they have narrative and they might have literary elements to them. And then more recently, iPad and technology moving on, apps and digital fiction. So that's what digital fiction is. And why do I find this interesting? Well, because I'm a stylistician and I'm a linguist, I'm very interested in how language works in combination with all of those different modes. So how does language, image, sound work together to create a meaningful, interesting, absorbing, potentially immersive narrative. I'm interested in how interactivity works in digital fiction because the reader has a role, and I'm constantly trying to understand how that role, that interactive role, interacts itself with a text and what that means. I'm interested in multimodality as a concept, so language being translated into visual languages, modes interacting with each other, And crucially, I'm very interested in readers and their experience of these digital fictions. And that might be where my dialogue comes in with you as students, because my next research project is trying to get more people to read digital fiction. So there might be something there about how can we get more readers involved, or what is blocking people from reading these kinds of texts. Okay.